Am I excited? Happy New Year! Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. New Year's are no big deal, I guess. But I don't know. I felt excited about how 2012. I don't know. It's nice to know that you're still alive. You wake up. Hey, here we are. And not only is New Year Day starting with today, we're also starting a new sermon series as well. And we're looking at the sayings of Jesus, the I am sayings. And next week, we're going to be looking at Jesus saying, I am the gate. The following week, I am the good shepherd. Following that, I am the resurrection and the life. After that, I am the way, the truth, and the life. After that, I am the true vine. And then finally, Pastor Tyler will be ending up, I am the bread of life. But today, we start with, I am the light of the world. And it comes to us from really a couple passages, John 8 and also John 9. And as the sermon series unfolds, you're going to notice perhaps, well, you'll notice because I'm telling you now, all of the I am passages that Jesus says are from the Gospel of John. And there's a reason for that. If you look at the Matthew, Mark, and Luke over here, and then John over here, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar. John is a little different. And John is the one that really gets into the imagery and captures those sayings that Jesus said about himself that had that imagery, light of the world. And so as we look at that, we'll be kind of continuing on in that vein. Now, as I looked at this whole aspect of Jesus, light of the world, and I saw, what does the light, what does the Bible say about light? There seemed to be three facts that really came to the surface. And the first fact about light in the Bible is that darkness is bad. Now, on the back of the bulletin, there's always the rationale that I use, the three facts, and I always give that ahead of time to the worship leaders and also to Jan Larson, who produces the bulletin. She needs to know what that is. So I forwarded my sermon information to her, and I got an email back from her. I told her I was going to read the email. Pastor George, I feel bad for darkness. I don't think it's always bad. I think sometimes it's good. Bats, processing photos, sleeping, meditating, enjoying the difference from the light requires darkness, and also bears need it in winter. But I see that it is difficult for humans to see God and His light when they are in the blackness of sin. I just want to note my feelings about darkness to you. Sincerely, Jan. So anyway, that's what anytime you have a statement, a fact, there are the other side. And I can see, she is perfectly right. But as we look at this aspect of darkness being bad, we go to the Bible, and we don't have to, sometimes I tell you, I think at the last sermon I mentioned that usually I use the concordance, or really the online concordance, and look at light. And I said, you could probably also find it by just starting reading at the beginning of the Bible and going through. Well, this one you could. John 1, or Genesis 1, very first chapter, the very first 4 verses, talks about light. And it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And we have the picture here of what the world was like in the very beginning. I've said this before when we've talked about creation. The picture of the world before anything was created was all water and everything dark. And that whole darkness kind of represented the chaos, and everything was all disjointed. And as we look at what God did in the next couple of verses, verses 3 and 4, it said, and God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and separated the light from the darkness. And so that darkness is kind of pushed out. The very first act of creation is God brings light to life. And as we look at that, it kind of is kind of reflective of, the fact that light is good and darkness is bad. And as we look throughout the Old Testament, we see this battle between light and dark, the forces of the two, and how the light of God is seeking to push back the darkness. Matter of fact, in contemporary culture, we saw that just a few years ago. George Lucas, was the one that, did the Star Wars movies. And Darth Vader, Luke, give in to the dark side. And I can't do it as well as, But, that whole dichotomy, the difference between light and dark. And as we look at that, and we look at a passage that is just a few verses after perhaps that most famous passage, John 3:16, we see that what Jesus is saying here about light. Light has come into the world, but men love the darkness instead of the light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light. As we look at that, we see how that darkness is equated with evil, and the light is that aspect that's kind of pushing back the evil. And then John mentions again, and this is a time in his first letter that he wrote, about the fact that God is light. He says, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him, yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live by the truth. And again, we see this aspect of walking in darkness is really equated with evil and with sin, that darkness. And so as we look at this first fact, we kind of implant in our minds, darkness is bad. Well, then the second fact that we see from Scripture is that Jesus is the light of the world. And of course, that is the real focus of this whole message, the I am statement. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And as we look at John chapter 8, verse 12, he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And as we look at this passage, Jesus brings in another image, and that image is of life. And if you looked in the very first chapter of John, you'd see the same thing. Jesus is the light of the world, and Jesus brings life to the world. When we live in light, we have life, eternal life, and with him. As we continue, we look, John is not the only one that talks about light. We look at what St. Paul said as he wrote to the church at Ephesus. And he said these words, everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for it is light that makes everything visible. This is why it is said, wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. This aspect that light comes in, and of course when light comes in, then dark goes away. And light is that aspect that makes things visible, where we can see clearly what our sin is. We can see which way we should take because the light has come in and made those things visible for us. We see the very purpose that Jesus states about why he came as we look in John chapter 12. Jesus says about himself, I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. Jesus is the one who comes in and shows us who he is and shows us what the right way to live. Oftentimes I talk about the fact, Jesus came to die to, that our sins might be forgiven. He rose from the dead so that death doesn't have a hold on us. He ascended into heaven, is preparing a place for us. But I always want to emphasize, too, that he lived his life among us really to show us how to live. He used his example for us as a light to us on how we should live our lives. As we look finally here in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, St. Paul says, a God who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light and knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. And we have here, that image that, Jesus Christ in our hearts. that our hearts are kind of really our minds. In those days, cardia, the Greek word for heart, we get the word cardiologist from it. Cardia, that was what people thought you thought with. You thought with your heart. And we think more in terms of, emotions in the heart. But in those days, it was kind of the thought processes. And Jesus comes in and influences our hearts, how we are to think in this world, what we are to say, what we are to do. And he also talks about that light has given us the knowledge of God. To know what to do. How many times have you, talked with people and they say, I just wish I knew what to do, what direction to take, there might be a difficult decision. Should I go to this college, this university? I wish I knew. Jesus Christ comes into our life, and at least as far as our living, everyday living, he shows us his knowledge through the light that has come into us. And that kind of, we have to ask that question then, okay, once we have this knowledge, then what do we do with it? And it really naturally leads into our third fact. And the third fact is that we are the light of the world. As we look at this, this is not just limited, this fact that we are the light of the world, not limited just to Jesus Christ and even the New Testament. But it is back in the Old Testament too. If you heard Isaiah read, it talked about, Isaiah said this, I, the Lord, will make you to be a light for the Gentiles, to open the eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, to release from the dungeons those who sit in darkness. That aspect that the Jewish people were the light to the non-Jews, the light to the Gentiles. And it wasn't just, Isaiah wasn't someone just isolated that said this. But I mean, if you go back again to the very beginning, Genesis, we see that Abraham is the one who is the blessing to the nations. We're looking for Abraham up here. He's coming up here very soon there. Yeah, there he is, Abraham. Abraham, who God said, I'm going to give you different blessings, and one of them is that you will be a blessing to other people, to the nations, to those that are outside of the people of Jerusalem. And as we look at that, we see, we kind of say, okay, we know who the Gentiles were for the Jews, everyone, who are our Gentiles, we might say, in a way. Anyone who doesn't have Jesus Christ in their heart is really who we are a light to shine to. And John isn't the only one that has a lock on this image of light. As we look at Matthew, he is the one that says here that you are the light of the world, Jesus says, as he points to us. You are the light of the world. Not only am I the light of the world, but now you are the light as well. And he continues, he says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Now, again, imagery that Jesus uses, just the same reason he uses parables, easy to understand. A hill, it's right up on the hill. Everyone can see that. And it's kind of a beacon for everyone around. And he said that's what you should be. You should be a shining example of that city on the hill. He continues on, and he says that neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand so it gives light to everyone in the house. The whole idea of, back in those days, they had a stand, and, they didn't use candles. They had little lamps, but there were little lamps and they had olive oil in there, and I guess I didn't really go to the trouble to try to figure out where I'd find one of those today, who uses lamps with olive oil and a little wick. So I have plenty of candles available, so I decided to use that. And of course, it really would have helped if we could turn all of the lights off in here. And even if we did turn all of the lights off, there's ambient light coming in here. But the whole aspect of what we're talking about is that if you have a candle, the whole idea is, put it up a little high on the stand so it can illuminate everything. But it wouldn't really make any sense if we can leave those lights there. if you put there's a little bit of difference. You get to see that, but a bowl, it just doesn't make any sense. And what he's saying, Jesus is saying to us, is don't hide our light under a bowl. Let other people see, that we believe in Jesus Christ. That through what we say and through what we do, that we are, really a reflection of Jesus Christ. And as we kind of continue, the last verse in Matthew, here, we looked at 14 and 15, but Matthew 16 says this, "In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and praise your Father in heaven." Notice it says, not that they can see your good works and say how good you are, but, they give praise to God in heaven. And as I looked at that, I thought about that, reflecting the light of Jesus Christ. And when you think about it, it's really not us that we're shining forth, but we're really shining forth the light of Jesus. And I thought of the illustration of the moon. At night you see, especially when it's a full moon, kind of brilliant, but we know that the moon doesn't really have any light at all from itself. It's simply a reflection from the sun's rays hitting the moon, and then that's what we see. And in the same way, we reflect the rays of Jesus Christ. We are a reflection of the sun, S-O-N, to other people. And so we think in terms then, how can we best reflect Jesus Christ to other people? How can we be a light to the world? If I started listing things that we could do, we probably wouldn't have enough time. But it really is up to each of us saying, how have I been gifted? Where are my strengths? We've talked about this many times. And how can we use those to shed light to other people around us that maybe we could say, maybe are in darkness to some degree? How can we be a light to other people? How can we let that light shine? It's interesting. Jesus didn't, continue and pick up on this. But if we put a bowl over our light, what happens to it? After a while, it's just going to go out. Jesus wants us to be a light to other people and to shine forth. And I loved with Pastor Tyler's sermon not too long ago where he talked about, commercialism and kind of going into the marketplace and being a light to other people, going through Starbucks and saying, I'm paying for the guy behind me, sort of a thing. And just being nice to, either a server at your table or a clerk or whatever it may be, to be that person that really shines forth to other people so that we indeed are what God intended us to be, that we are indeed what Jesus Christ said we are, that we are the light of the world. Let's pray.